Everybody, and thank you for joining the launch of the Australia-India Business Exchange 2021. My name is Penny Burtt. I'm the Group CEO of Asialink. It's my huge pleasure to be joined today by the Hon Dan Tehan MP, the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, here at the Wheeler Centre and live streamed across Australia and India for today's launch. We're delighted that so many of you could join us today. Today's event is proudly delivered by Austrade in partnership with Asialink, Australia's National Centre for Asia Capability. Before we begin today's proceedings, I would like to acknowledge formally that we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who've been custodians of this land for thousands of years. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations people here with us today and wherever you may be joining us from today. If you're wishing to share in the conversation or join us, please use the hashtag AIBX, Australia-India Business Exchange hashtag. So a very brief overview of today's proceedings. Today's proceedings will involve a special address from the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, who's joined us. Following that, we'll have a brief in-conversation with the Minister. Then we're going to move to a business panel discussion with a fabulous panel of some highly successful business people. Mr. Dhruv, Deepak, Saxena, who's the Managing Director of Riverina Oils and Bioenergy. Ms. Cristina, Talacko, owner and founder of SalDoce Fine Foods, or you might know them better as Yes You Can brand. And Mr. Bruce Rodgerson, who is the CEO of Rubicon Water. During the Business Leaders panel, we would welcome questions from the audience or from those of you joining the live stream. Our panel session is a great opportunity for all of us to explore emerging opportunities for Australian businesses across key sectors, including agri-foods, infrastructure, and METS. And we're going to have a fantastic opportunity to hear firsthand from senior business people who've made the most of both the opportunities, the vast growth in the Indian market, and who've navigated some interesting challenges on their journeys to success. So with that, could I now introduce the Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, and the Member for Wannon in Victoria, the Hon Dan Tehan MP. As many of you know, Minister Tehan previously served as the Minister for Education and Minister for Social Services. He's had extensive overseas experience prior to his career in politics, having served in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and been posted at the Australian Embassy in Mexico. Fast fact, many of you might not have actually known. The Minister has also worked in the agriculture sector, so brings that great hands-on experience to the portfolio. We're incredibly fortunate to have someone with that background in the portfolio and guiding the future of Australia's trade and investment. Minister, with that, could I invite you to the stage?
Thank you, Penny, for that very warm welcome, and it's terrific to see you. And for those of you who don't know, I worked with Penny when I was in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and it's probably been about 20 years since we've seen each other, so it's terrific to see you, and thanks for that very warm introduction. And can I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet and pay my respect to their elders past, present and future. Can I also acknowledge the former Victorian Premier who's here with us today, Ted Bayou. Wonderful to see you, Ted, and Ted's someone who has a great passion for the Australia-India relationship, and I owe you a phone call too, Ted, so I'll look forward to catching up with you. And also, I understand that we have the Consulate General of India here, Mr. Girish Kavia. It's terrific to see you as well. Can I say how great it is to be here with you this afternoon? I don't think there is a more important relationship at this time than the Australia-India relationship. It's incredibly important not only to us, but to India as well, but also to the Indo-Pacific region. And I look forward as Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment to doing what I can to enhance the relationship. As Education Minister, I made 2 overseas trips. One was to Malaysia and one was to India because, in my view, the strategic importance, especially in developing our services trade with India, was absolutely vital, and in particular when it came to education services. And although COVID-19 has in many ways disrupted that market, I look forward to seeing that continue to grow. But not only in terms of students and students either coming to Australia or Australian students going to India, but also in terms of investment. What we want to see is investment occurring, not only in higher education, but in other elements as well. And that's where this business exchange is going to become so important, because if we are to continue to grow the relationship, making sure that businesses both in India and in Australia understand each other, understand the opportunities, understand how they can work together, is going to be absolutely vital for us being able to grow the relationship. I hope from a government level that we're going to be able to do our bit by enhancing the trading arrangements, by hopefully setting us on a path potentially one day to realising that desire of having an Australia-India free trade agreement, but also making sure that we can work together when it comes to other incredibly important fora, when it comes to how we trade with the rest of the world. At the moment, for instance, ensuring that we can get the World Trade Organisation back up and running as the paramount rule setter for global trade is incredibly important. And I think Australia and India have a big role to play working together, hopefully to getting the WTO back doing the job that we all want it to be doing in setting those trading rules and making sure that also that those trading rules are adhered to. So that's another example where governments are going to need to work together, but it can't just be governments. We need business doing its job as well, and that's business in India and business here in Australia. And one of the really heartening things that I heard and saw when I was appointed minister just before Christmas was to see the Indian business community come out on Christmas Eve saying how important the relationship is and how they want to see both governments working together to enhance the relationship. And it is a message that I get loud and clear from here in Australia as well. The business community here understands how important India is, especially to ensuring that we can further diversify our markets. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here this afternoon to launch this Australian-India Business Exchange. Can I encourage all businesses, both here in Australia and those online in India, to make sure that you do everything you can to make this exchange a success. From a government level, we want to do that, but we want to make sure that also at a people-to-people aspect that we can do it also through our business leaders and through our businesses. And we shouldn't underestimate how important not only goods and services trade between our two countries, but also investment. Because if we're truly to grow and develop the relationship, ensuring that investment is at the heart of it as well is going to be absolutely vital. So Penny, I'll leave it there. It's terrific to be here for this launch. I look forward to my interview. I understand it's not going to be like Q&A. It'll be very different in its nature, which is very good. But can I thank everyone who's come along here today, this afternoon, for this launch, and I look forward to working with you all in the months to come to make sure we're doing everything we can to enhance the Australia-India relationship. Thanks a lot.
Minister, thank you very much for those opening remarks. And what a pleasure it is to be on this side of the microphone with you this afternoon. Minister, thank you for being willing to take the opportunity to go a little bit deeper, actually, on the topic of the Australia-India economic relationship with us this afternoon at the launch of the Australia-India Business Exchange. We thought it might be interesting, given that you mentioned the strengthened Australia-India economic partnership, to hear some more from you about recent developments in the bilateral relationship, which appears to have gone from strength to strength, and the implications for the business community with us today.
Yeah. Look, I think there's a willingness from both governments to really promote and develop the relationship, and we've seen that in recent weeks. For the first time, we've seen some very serious re-engagement from both officials at the India level and the Australian level on what we can do to develop and promote the economic partnership. There was some early inroads that were made, and then things, I think it would be fair to say, stalled somewhat, but we've really seen a re-engagement from both sides, and I'm looking forward to, in the next few days, speaking to my ministerial counterpart in India, really to do a bit of a stock take on where things are at, and hopefully to really put some ambition back into the economic relationship. So it's very heartening, and I must say, as I mentioned in my speech, the fact that the Indian business community are very keen to see the relationship flourish and prosper, I think is incredibly important. We know that it's the case here in Australia, and if we can get businesses both in India and here in Australia really driving things, I think that'll mean governments will have to step up to the plate as well.
Absolutely. I think we're all really excited to hear about the government-to-government level of activity, and, excited about the level of commitment, including, with the new comprehensive strategic partnership and all the work that you're doing. Where do you see as the very specific areas of opportunity that our business sector might be looking at in the trade and investment area?
Well, I honestly believe right across the board there are opportunities everywhere, and I think we shouldn't sort of limit ourselves to certain areas, because I think when it comes to the complementarity of the two economies, whether it be in agriculture, whether it be in water, whether it be in higher education, whether it be in tourism, whether it be in the broader services area, critical minerals, there's a lot we can do with our minerals services exports to help develop minerals, especially critical minerals in India, or where we can play a role in those critical supply chains for India, and vice versa. I think there are many ways that India can help us here in Australia, whether it be by providing investment or expertise in certain areas. So I really, what I would love to see is the comprehensive partnership become comprehensive. I think that's what we should all be aiming to achieve.
Absolutely, and I think many in our audience are very keen to see that happen. A question that is often raised, given this level of attention and commitment, is what are the prospects for an Australia-India free trade agreement?
Look, it's going to require a lot of hard work. I think it's achievable, but I think it's going to take time. And I think first of all, we want to see a real willingness on the ground from business to make sure that we can develop, grow and enhance the economic partnership. And then also we need to see that from a government to government level. I think one of the really encouraging things is in terms of the strategic partnership outside of the economic partnership, we're seeing a real strength in the growth of the partnership. And with that, I hope that we'll be able to also drive the economic partnership as well. So, you know, the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day. I think that's the general approach that we're going to have to take with the economic partnership, because I think we're just going to have to take it step by step. But from an Australian point of view, we want to be doing what we can to enhance the relationship. Everything that I'm hearing from the Indian side is that they want to do the same. So as long as we can continue to build that trust, and a lot of it is about trust, understanding that we do want a real partnership, that it isn't just something which is purely in Australia's interests or it's something that's in India's interests. It's something that it's in both our interests. And trade does that, and especially where you can get that complementarity. So the more we can build that trust and build the relationship in many areas, I think then we will be able to get there. But as I said when I became Minister, there were 3 Ps that were going to drive the approach that I took. Proactive, and I want to be very proactive when it comes to the India relationship. Principled, so i.e. we want to make sure that what we do will advance both our interests and in this instance India's interests, and where necessary patience. And you know, we'll be patient as we continue to try and drive the relationship forward.
We love the Ps. Minister, thank you. If we could turn to exporting, it's been a tough 12 months for many Australian exporters, particularly those in agribusiness, but much more broadly. What kind of support has been available to support exporters, and particularly to help them as they're beginning to approach trade diversification and markets like India? What are some of the steps that you've taken over the past 12 months to sort of help with all that disruption?
Well, you're right, Penny. It has been a hard time for our exporters, and COVID has obviously made life difficult right across the board, but none more so when it's come to exporters. And that's where programs, especially like IFAM, our freight management program, has really stepped in, because as we've seen huge impact on the aviation sector, also when it comes to shipping being disrupted, we've had to make sure that we've been able to get our exports, key exports, into markets, and that's where our international freight assistance mechanism stepped in and was able to do that. In terms of diversification, the government put in place a $70 million program to help our exporters diversify, and we're continuing to develop that program, because as we've seen, and has always been the case, markets can come and go for various reasons, especially in the commodities area, and we've got to make sure that we have a diversification approach to our exporters so we can deal with that. Obviously at the moment there are the disruptions that are in Australia-China relationship, which is playing out in part with the trading relationship. So helping our exporters to be able to diversify when those issues have impacted upon them has been incredibly important, and we'll continue to help and support them. And in a way, that's where the India relationship becomes very important, because the more we can look to diversify into markets like India, the more it'll help our exporters. So it's one of the reasons why I'm very keen to see what I can do to further strengthen the relationship.
Thank you, Minister. So our audience today, I think, in the questions that they sent in prior to today's event, were very interested in when borders might be opening. And in particular, given that you're a former Minister for Education, you know how incredibly important the Australia-India education relationship is to both people here in Australia and, of course, to the many, many students in India who are keen to be joining us here. I was wondering, do you have any messages for students who either want to start or resume their studies in Australia?
Well, it's a great question, Penny, and in particular very timely, because we've just heard today that we will, for the first time, have a two-way bubble operating with New Zealand. The New Zealand Prime Minister has just confirmed that a little over 30 minutes ago. So I see that very much as a great start to the reopening of Australia's borders. And what we need to do is continue to build on that, and that's something that I'll be keen to do, wearing my trade portfolio hat, my tourism portfolio hat and my investment portfolio hat, because when it comes to both those three areas, making sure people can travel is vitally important. In terms of international students and return of international students, there's a couple of things that I'd like to say. First of all, last year we were able to get 80% of our international students here to Australia, which was a great achievement. And what we want to do is make sure that we're continuing to look after and care for those students who are here, in particular those Indian students who are here, and that's something that we'll continue to do from a federal government point of view, through our universities, through our vocational education providers and through our state and territory governments. The second thing is we do want to start planning to see those students return. Now, while I don't have a crystal ball and can't say concretely when that will be, my hope is that we will start to see movement again next year. And so I would say to all those students in India who are looking to come to Australia, hopefully if you start planning now to be able to recommence your studies next year, we might be able to offer a pathway forward for you to be able to come. And I'd also say to Australian students, think about India also as a place to study. There's great opportunities there to get just wonderful experiences by going to India, and that's something that we need to keep on promoting very much in a two-way thing. While we want to welcome as many Indian students here to Australia, we also want to see as many Australian students going to India as well and getting those experiences, because those people-to-people links and two-way flows are what really will drive the strength of the relationship.
Absolutely, vital for the longer term and such a big area of opportunity. So finally, Minister, we're here to launch the Australia-India Business Exchange program. And are there any particular highlights of the program for this year that you wanted to share with us?
Well, before I touch on that, Penny, can I just thank you and Asialink for hosting us today and for the role that you've played. And it's terrific to be here and keep up the great work, won't you? Look, I don't think there's any particular standout for me, because I just see the opportunities as so vast in the Australia-India relationship that really pigeonholing any one particular part of it, I don't think does justice. So if I could give one take-home message today, it's if businesses both in India and Australia can just engage in this exchange, explore opportunities, explore where you can work together, explore where you can enhance our relationship, nothing would make me happier than Australia's Trade Minister, because that is in the end how we're going to develop and grow the relationship. It's those close people-to-people links, searching for opportunities, exploring whether it be on the investment front and the services area and the exchange of goods, just where those opportunities are, and then seeking to invest your money, your innovation, your entrepreneurship in the relationship. That in the end is what's going to help this relationship grow. So that would be my take-home message to everyone is please don't leave anything on the table. Give it your all and do what you can for this wonderful relationship, because I think it's only going to get stronger. It's only going to get more and more important. It's only going to enhance and develop. And there's so many wonderful opportunities there. So please, if businesses can do their bit by really engaging in this exchange, I think this afternoon and this program will have been a terrific success.
Minister, thank you very much. Thank you for those rousing words, and what a perfect segue into the next segment of this afternoon's program, where having had your fantastic framing and your exhortation to do it, we are going to be joined by a business panel with some incredibly successful entrepreneurs to share their stories, their insights, and actually to show us all the way So thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure,
great
Penny.
To see
great
you.
to be with you. Cheers.
Could
Thanks,
I-
everyone.
Thank you. Could I invite our business panel to join me on the stage, please? Thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to pivot so I can see you. I feel as though this senior business panel needs little introduction, but you are going to bear with me while I explain a little bit more about who you are and what you do. So we have Mr. Didi Saxena, who is the Managing Director of Riverina Oils and Bioenergy, who is very well known, I think, to many in the audience. Didi is also has a member of the Australia-India CEO Forum, appointed by the Prime Minister, and has been incredibly active in both business-to-business and government-to-business exchange in helping build the relationship for many years. It is worth saying at the outset that Riverina Oils and Bioenergy is one of the largest greenfields investments in value added in agriculture in Australia in the last 12 years. It's a fantastic example, and I know Didi will be speaking more about this today, of positive inward foreign investment from India. If I could move then to Cristina. Cristina is, as I said earlier, the owner and founder of SalDoce Fine Foods, and she's also a director of the Export Council of Australia board. Her company manufactures allergen-sensitive foods in Australia and are now exporting to over 27 markets, including India. SalDoce Fine Foods began exporting to India 4 years ago and distributes a range of vegan baking and foods to that market. And finally, last but not least, Bruce, Mr. Bruce Rodgerson, who is the CEO of Rubicon Water. Bruce is the founding director and CEO of Rubicon Water, which is a technology company that delivers advanced technology for automated irrigation systems. Rubicon Water is supporting India in many major water reform projects and using its technology to support system modernisation. Bruce has led the company through its internationalisation, and I understand it's actually operated in 15 markets globally, including India. So we're looking forward to hearing a lot more about what Rubicon Water has been doing in India. So with that, if I could start off with you, Didi, and say, we've heard from the Minister about how important the relationship is for Australia with India. India, of course, is transitioning, like the rest of the world, through the COVID crisis, but actually looks as though it's got strong projected growth. During the COVID period, the Indian government implemented a very wide range of economic reforms, fundamentally transforming the business environment. On the bilateral front, as the Minister has said, we're in a very positive phase of the relationship. We have an Australia-India strategy, an India-Australia strategy, a comprehensive strategic partnership, and clearly deep commitment, the government-to-government level, to deepen the relationship. So, as a successful businessman and a long-time observer of the Australia-India relationship, what do you think it is going to take to get that deeper trade and investment relationship?
I personally believe that the government-to-government relationships are certainly progressing at a very rapid pace, and there's a significant change in the last 20 years in that aspect. The people-to-people relationship is also at a very On a scale of 10, if I was to put the government-to-government relationship, I'll put it at 8. People-to-people relationship, I'll put it around 9. But the business-to-business relationship, I'll give a score of 3. And the reason for that is that the relationships have been obviously high on intent. And there are certain things which the government can deliver, which people-to-people can deliver. But in the eventual sense, it's the businesses which really convert businesses. And I think the reason for that is twofold. My personal belief is that there is a very poor degree of India literacy in the business community, particularly at the big end of town in Australia. And I would also like to mention that we did a dipstick study in India, and the Australian literacy amongst the Indian business community is very poor. So I'd really encourage if we could, from both sides of the government, do a major focused literacy program addressed very focused to the business community. So that is the first thing. As a matter of fact, surprisingly as it may sound, Australia does not feature, if you look at the priority of Indian businesses wanting to invest, in the top 20 places. Singapore does, Thailand does, of course, US, UK, and there are historical reasons also. The second thing is that as far as Indians are concerned, and I feel this has been missed, Indian investment in Australia is a huge opportunity. And the reason why I say that is because India has entrepreneurship, which unfortunately is limited in Australia by circumstances. We are mainly a country of monopolies and duopolies in the mining sector, and we are a commodity country, and that's the nature of this country. But I think that there are huge opportunities, particularly in the field of food and agri, where Australia has perhaps the best quality commodity, and we market our commodities at market prices. We don't get a premium for anything that we produce as superior quality. But what Australia has is outstanding image in the Asian markets. And I think that's an area where Indians, with their entrepreneurship and misunderstood, Indian businesses have a lot of capital, and they want to diversify. As a matter of fact, after COVID, Indian businesses do want to diversify, and we must capture that opportunity to basically let Indians come here, understand as to what we have in this country, and use this as a doorway and access to particularly to the Asian markets. On the other hand, I think what will drive the Australian businesses is not going to be driven by the publicly listed companies, because I personally believe they're risk averse, and they're looking for because we come from a market which is mature and which basically gives reasonable dividend. But if you really look at it, the SME sector, and as is evident from people who have invested in India, it is going to be the SME sector which is going to drive in the initial phases and will be the key catalyst to driving investment and growth in India, largely because the SMEs are privately owned family businesses. They look for the strategic dividend rather than financial dividend. They can take a longer-term view, and they have more patience and staying power, as the minister said. And I personally believe that the last point I want to make is that while it's important for us to look at it from a trading platform, I think the question is really, India is a place where I think Australia would do better to invest. Because if you really look at the compatibility of what we can, and I mean, our exports to India are probably 8 times more than India's export to Australia, are largely in the area of mining or commodities. And we must not forget the dimension that India is never going to be a China in terms of commodities. And therefore, in agriculture, particularly, I personally believe Australian companies must look at taking Australian raw material and converting into value-added goods and access the markets, which incidentally I've had an experience to do. We launched Unibic in India in 2005, which is a $150 million company in about 200,000 outlets. So I feel the opportunities are huge. We have to look at it from an investment point of view rather than just trade. We have to become more literate. We have to get the business community to really understand each other much better. And I personally believe the SMEs will drive the business.
Didi, thank you. Picking up on your point and the point made by the Minister about the opportunity in agribusiness and food, we're very fortunate to have Cristina with us, who's got deep expertise in that area. Given that you're operating in so many markets globally, it's really interesting to hear from you about SalDoce's journey in India and why you chose to export to India, and perhaps what you feel have been some of the drivers for your success in the Indian market. Thanks, Cristina.
Thanks, Penny. Well, I'll just start by saying that India is probably one of my favorite countries to do business with. And it wasn't really in the radar when we started talking about exporting to, other countries. We were very focused on the Middle East and Southeast Asia, and we've always heard that it was very difficult to do business in India. So in my experience, it has proven to be the opposite. We've had a very smooth trajectory into India, perhaps because of the way that we found a very reliable and trustworthy partner or importer for our products. And it all happened at a food show in Dubai, the Gulf Foods, that a lot of you that work in food and beverage must have taken part before. At this particular food show, we noticed an incredible interest from Indian buyers and retailers towards the type of our products, because we produce vegan and vegetarian products, and in India, 500,000 people are vegetarians. They also looking for high quality products, because as they become more affluent and the middle class is growing, and I read that by 2025, the middle class in India will amount to 550 million people. So that's a very sizable and very interesting market for the type of products that we produce. And they also look at Australian products being high quality. We have built a very good reputation internationally as the clean and green country that produces beautiful products. So all of those things combined, and plus their interest in health, because as they become more affluent, they also wanting to feed their families higher quality products. They want less sugar, they want less gluten. That's how the interest started, and we started doing business with a particular distributor. And it went smoothly because we made we had the objective of visiting India many times before we introduced the products there. We wanted to make sure that we were priced at the right level on the shelves. We wanted to understand our competition, and we saw that there was enormous opportunity. We made it a long-term market, so we didn't want it just a one sell and come back home and be happy with that and hope for the next order. We really invested a lot in marketing campaigns, and we paid a lot of attention supporting our distributors there. So our journey has been quite smooth so far in India, and from being a smaller brand in India, we sort of now have a little bit of that market, which is the gluten-free market, as it grows. And we believe that there's enormous opportunity also for plant-based protein products and other products. There are difficulties, obviously. I'd be lying if I said that everything was absolutely without any problems. But when you have a partner that understands the system, the labeling requirements, the taxation, and all the other issues, then it's much easier for us from Australia to do business with India. And in that sense, we're quite grateful that we've had really good support over there.
Fantastic, thank you. And Bruce, moving to you and the infrastructure sector, your company, Rubicon Water, has had very significant success in the infrastructure sector in India, which many actually view as a very challenging sector for foreign companies to work in. Do you want to share a little bit about Rubicon Water's journey in India and some of both the kind of opportunities that you see in infrastructure, but any of the challenges you've had?
Thanks. Yeah, as I suppose, opposed to Christine and Dee Dee, our market is infrastructure, so that's federal and state governments and their semi-government agencies is the people we're committing to. And I wish I had a story like Christine that happened a lot easier than you thought. Ours has been a very long journey. So we first, I suppose the first thing I would say is, you know, in dealing in this infrastructure space, you've got to have something unique. So you've got to have a business proposition that is protectable, that is and that is valuable, and then that is a value proposition that can be in market. So in the case of India, our technology is the technology behind most of the Murray-Darling Basin irrigation authorities, water efficiency in terms of saving water, but also getting the water to the farms at the times when the farms can use it most productively. So that very much fits the broad problems in India water resources. And we could see that, you know, 20 years ago. And we know it's a big market, and India has such huge water resource problems that there has been for decades extremely large investments being made. So it ticked those boxes. The next thing for us was really finding a pathway through to marketing ourselves, and with us marketing our solution. So our technology led to, you know, is modernising the way a gravity irrigation district is formed. So in about 2008, we actually we delivered a pilot project in Palachi, and that was fully funded by us as quite a small company at the time. So we put in the technology, we worked with local engineers and got a small-scale pilot up and running, which has been fundamental to our business growth, and that was 10 years ahead of us ever generating a dollar of revenue out of India. Utilising that, and then global irrigation forums. You know, your Christine's food show in Dubai. Well, irrigation is the same. Irrigation operators around the world come together for conferences, and India is a big part of that. So, understanding who the influencers are. So, we know the money comes from governments, but what are the institutions they deal with? World Bank, Asia Bank. What are the academic institutes that they rely on for their decision making? And work all that together to build a profile about what can be done with our solution. Dee Dee mentioned the people-to-people stuff, and that's just key. And you found a great partner, which is really a huge part of doing business in any market, and particularly India. To understand, you know, we had a good picture. We were able to understand what the countrywide dynamics around our water resources, where our technology would fit. But us finding the right partner to be able to deal with there, to lead us through the mire of just how basics happen in India. And that again was a journey. Two times we had partners put a fair bit of effort into, and for various reasons didn't work. But we now, from about 2017 onwards, we've got a great partner in Hyderabad, Meta Servo Drive. So not associated, not typically in our industry, but they've come from but they are expanding sort of entrepreneurial Indian company that saw opportunity in our space. So we met at a trade show. We actually bid against each other at a tender, and built a relationship over quite a few years. So. Yeah, I think, and through that, we're able to eventually win this contract in Karnataka, which has allowed us now to build a factory. We're now, rather than having a Rubicon-funded small project in Palachi, we've got one of the largest irrigation modernised systems, automated irrigation systems being commissioned at the moment in Karnataka, which is a fantastic platform now for the rest of our advancement there.
It's about 3,000 kilometres of canals. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. 450,000 hectares. So it's about 2/3 of Golden Murray Water, which is Australia and one of the world's largest irrigation districts, which we've automated here in Australia. And I suppose one thing that stands out for me is that Golden Murray Water District, as we worked with it, was it's still going now, but the major part of that rollout took 10 to 12 years. This Indian project that we're dealing with, when we tendered, we had to deliver the infrastructure in 2 years, the whole thing. And we knew we had the production capability to build our part didn't think there was a hope in hell that it could be delivered on that framework. But the capability of the people in India to roll, in a very rural area, to roll out that infrastructure. With COVID, it's going to take 3 years, but they're going to get there. And it's, it's pretty impressive on the infrastructure space what the in-country capabilities are in India.
That's actually really interesting. It touches on two topics that often come up when we talk about doing business in India. First of all, that is in the Australia-India economic strategy, the proposal was made that Australian business really focus on 1 or 2 states and actually deeply understand state-level opportunities, but also the need to understand the skill base in India. And so you're saying that you found both a great relationship, there at the state level, but in terms of the skill building, have you had to do very much in terms of skills transfer?
Yeah, a lot, both with our partner. Luckily, our partner is a very technical, engineering-based organisation, so there's a lot of parallels between Meta and Rubicon. We're pretty similar organisations, just in different countries. So there's been a big, pre-COVID, there was a lot of our people based over there. There's a lot of technology transfer. We built a factory together and we're operating that together over there. So that stuff's pretty easy. The bigger transfer is in this rural area, taking farmers who are literally still using oxes and shovels to moving to technology and ordering their water on a mobile phone, breaking them out of the cycle of having to irrigate when the government may provide water, to actually being in control of when they can get water to their crop, and trusting the technology. So that's a huge focus of us in trying to invest more so, educational training, agronomic workshops with the farmers, trying to build up the capability within the rural areas. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I am going to ask Cristina a quick question about technology and her business model, which I believe is evolving very quickly. But I'd actually just like to do 2 things. I'd like to ask the audience, if you have any questions from the audience here, please raise your hand. We have microphones in the room. I would also like to remind people on the live stream that if you have questions, please let us know. And Elise from our team is going to run them across the room in a low technology effort to make sure that we know what you're saying in the chat on the live stream. But Cristina, back to you. As you've done business in India, how have you used technology to evolve your business model, and how are you thinking around new platforms?
So there's a few facets of technology in our business. Mainly we invest a lot in food technology itself, and we've been developing it's quite evolving, that sector of industry. So we have to follow the trends and sometimes be ahead of the trends. And it's really important to understand what the locals in India are looking for. And as Bruce was saying, it's a very diverse country. So each state has different tastes in India. They have different cultural nuances, and they do things completely differently. So it's very important to understand where are you going to market your products and your new inventions and your new ingredients too. So we look at working again closely with our partners there and our distributors to understand what the next trend is, and we try and develop things for their taste as well. We don't want to go too far from the core of what we do here, because the company stands for a certain global sort of brand that you don't want to change from country to country, but we still need to adapt to their local taste, to the trends, and to what they're looking for. And I think in India, for us, one thing that we've learned is that it's very fast. The social media in India is huge because there's a very large young population and they're very high tech. And so if you want to keep up with them, and our focus is to really supply more products to the youth because it's vegan, it's healthy, and that's where our market is. You have to be very quick, and to be able to have a national marketing campaign there is very difficult because each area and each region is so different to each other, and how they use technology as well in social media and how they perceive our products. So you just have to be really clever on how you do that. And in my opinion, in India, for the type of products that are more high quality, and we're not competing with the general baking mixes or the things that are more locally made, which we can't because of a price perspective. We're competing at a much higher level. Then that means we need to really offer a messaging that is really appealing to them. And we use technology, food innovation to convey that message, but it has to fit into what they need and their trends.
Thank you. I think it's really interesting for an Australian audience to hear that the innovation economy, use of social media and marketing is very sophisticated in India. And you obviously have invested quite heavily in understanding that. To what extent are you building that sort of understanding here in Australia, or are you working with partners on the ground in India to sort of get underneath those big trends?
So in India, you have to really set up your social media platforms over there with people there. So you do need people to support you over there. You can't possibly do it from here. And it means you just have you have to allocate your budget for all of that. And it simply is a very big investment, but it's a long-term investment, as I was saying. I think sales during COVID for us that were online, and we started focusing a lot more on e-commerce because our products are shelf stable, and that really helps us. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to sell online in India with all these distances and the issues they have with transportation and shipment. But because we're shelf stable, we could focus a lot on online sales. And in the beginning of COVID, our sales in India grew by 40–50% because there was a lot of people demanding the demand was huge for the type of products we offer. People wanted to bake at home, they couldn't go out, and they were shopping online. And things now stabilized more or less, and now people are going back to the stores. The other issue with us that is better to actually sell online than the stores is because it's very expensive to be present on the shelves in India. You pay a premium to be on the shelves, but also because they have a very unorganized still system of retail. 98% of the retail is still the small mums and dads sort of small shops, local shops. And and it's actually growing. The big chains are growing, but they're very much concentrated in the hands of food hall and the large players. So it's really quite good to be present at the e-commerce, which is growing very, very quickly in India.
Thank you. It's really interesting that globally we've seen that incredible explosion in e-commerce through the COVID pandemic, and if anything, that acceleration is opening new opportunities, which it's been a way of compensating for some of the supply chain challenges, I think, in the short term. We have some questions which I'd like to share from our live stream. Before I do that, I'm just going to come back to you, Didi, on this question of inbound investment for a minute. We often talk about the fact that Australia and India, despite the opportunities, barely rate in each other's top 20 lists for investment. But you were quite successful in securing inbound Indian investment into your business. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the opportunity is for inbound investment from India and what we need to do to be attracting that sort of investment going forward?
See, in my particular case, I'll mention that it's quite fascinating. The bankers were Indian. The original promoters, as a matter of fact, the only Australian investment is mine in a $150 million project. And the reason for that was that two things. One is that I think business-to-business relationship, as the minister said and you mentioned, are very important. And once there is a platform of understanding the opportunity, trusting the investment parameters and the people involved, makes a significant difference. I think the way in which also Indians look at investment is more entrepreneurial. They are more opportunistic, they're willing to take more risks, they're willing to look at an opportunity with a longer term, because the stock markets are not the only primary driver. And since they are growth markets, the mindset and the skill sets are quite different. Whereas when an Australian company, particularly a large organization, looks at investment in India, the fact of the matter is they have numerous limitations, being especially if you're a listed company. But more importantly, I think the issue basically is they're more factorial. And reality is that we don't have the mindset and the skill sets in Australia, much as people may not like to hear this. Because, look, we are a homogeneous market. India is a highly heterogeneous market. And I'd like to just take upon the diversity issue which Christine talked about. I'll give you an example of my wife and myself. We've been married for 42 years. She comes from Bangalore, I come from the north. Our languages are 99.9% different. They are written in a different format. Probably our DNAs are totally different. The thing is, the food is totally different. And the only common dish between her grandmother and my grandmother, I'm not talking great-grandmother, was boiled rice. And that too of a different variety. But, you know, this is what India is. I mean, there are very many Indias. And again, the thing is, what India do you want to see? You can walk on one street and you can see 22nd century India. You can see 16th century India. You can see a house of a billionaire. You can see slums. So the whole coexistence and diversity is very different. And I think this is the key issue for Australian businesses. The analysis cannot be done on the 26th floor of Rialto. The analysis has to be done by board members and senior management on the ground in India. And your own Asialink study, along with BCG, shows that on the index of Asia capability, the Australian board members and the senior Australian executives rank less than 15%.
Not these ones.
No, I'm not saying. but we're talking, they're entrepreneurs, and that's what I said. The SME will be the key driver. And I personally believe, and same true of Indians. I mean, I think Indians just don't understand the opportunity. And frankly, if you ask me, the opportunities in Australia, I mean, there was no reason for us to do what we did. Just for your information, Minister, Cargill and Grain Corp are big companies, but our company is the market leader. We're the largest producer of canola in Australia, largest exporter. And we export to the United States. We converted a commodity into a non-GM product. And today we are the largest seller. We're the only second approved FDA. So it's a question of mindset that you bring. So I think that what will happen is, it's not just about investment. I think it's about fusion of minds. It's about creating greater intellectual capital. It's not just financial capital. And I think that is the key. And I think similarly, I think if Australians start looking at India, they will start understanding the value of innovation. I mean, India's medicine industry is going to grow from 60 billion, which was there in 2008, to it's about 400 billion now, to they're saying it'll become about 500 billion in the next 10 years. So look at the opportunity. But do you know, I don't want to get into details, but the value of each and every medicine and each and every surgery is about 1/10. With better outcomes on cardiac by Narayan Hospital in Bangalore than United States. So I think there is a lot of reverse. When Australian companies invest in India, they can bring back a lot home because the cost of healthcare is a major issue. So anyway, I mean, the point basically is investment will create a lot more opportunities than that we see just being created by trade, because that's a supply-demand gap.
Didi, thank you for that. You actually answered beautifully one of the questions from the live stream, which was how important is understanding the culture of India when wanting to create a business partnership. So you've nailed that one, and you also explained the secret to 42 years worth of fabulous marriage is having boiled rice in common. I like that. I would like to go to the audience now. I understand we have a question up the back. If you haven't answered it already, Didi. No, I'm going to come back to the live stream questions. And Bruce, could I ask you this question? I know that your area of specialisation is water, But we have a question around how are Australian infrastructure providers perceived in India? And do you see opportunities in any other sectors for Australian companies?
Well, it is a massive market, so yes, but I come back to those same principles I had before, just because you're an engineering or infrastructure or construction company in Australia, and you might be the best in Australia, that doesn't translate directly to India. So you've got to see that fundamental of what you could bring and is it of value. It is such a different market on that front, and that's one of the reasons we needed a partner, so that we don't, so that we can have someone that delivers that part of the work. So, for instance, in Golden Murray Water, to go back to that, I said it took Australia 10 to 12 years. One of the reasons for that was the complexity around OH&S, just the logistical systems of getting things done. Now, in India, for instance, in the area we work, we try and donate PPE. The labourers on the field have never worn shoes. The labourers building concrete and construction sites have never worn shoes. They don't. You can give them to them, they sell them. They won't wear them. They won't wear construction hats. So now that doesn't mean Australian infrastructure, companies can't participate, but you've got to understand that you're working in a very different environment. And as DD says, if you're a large publicly listed Australian construction firm, you're going to find that pretty challenging. How do you find your niche in delivering infrastructure in that environment? So it's a massive market. There's big opportunity, but I think you've got to be realistic and do the background to understand what you're getting involved with and whether what you can bring is going to add value, and whether you can avoid getting involved in some of the things which you can't as a Western company be involved with. In our case, we had to step aside from any involvement of the construction side of the works because I can't put a Rubicon person in an environment where the people he's supervising aren't following any Western style OH&S systems. So we need to take a step back from where we were in Australia, what value proposition we would do, and the extent of our reach. We'd step back to a position and bring in a local partner that work in that environment.
That's a really interesting observation around both what might have been a challenge and an interesting way in which you found a way forward. If I could just move back to you for a minute, Cristina. One of the issues that often comes up in discussions about the Indian market is labelling requirements for food. And, it's similar but different. When you actually get into the market and on the ground, there are requirements that don't look anything like what we have in Australia. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, so they do have very different labelling requirements to other countries, and that's one difficulty for people like my company, that ideally your export packaging, you want to do the same for every country, and you don't want to have different separate designs and printouts of different boxes and for our products. But to actually understand the labelling requirements, which changed a lot in India, the best way is to really have a partner, a local partner, who understands all of that and navigates through the system quite well and is always in touch with all the different departments. And the difficulty with the labelling is that they require, for example, E-numbers, which is something that the whole world is moving away from, and they still want E-numbers. They also, there's some extra requirements. For example, we have to have the veg symbols there. There's other things that other countries don't do. But having said that, India is actually not as hard as countries like Indonesia and other countries that we worked with before. So for us, it hasn't been an enormous hurdle. It hasn't been all that difficult in terms of labeling. It's more understanding the changes, because they can change from a minute to another, and then you're found with your shipment stuck at port and not being able to get in. And that's what you have to actually make sure, that these things don't happen too fast, that you haven't caught up with them. So it's really important to maintain regular communication with your buyers, importers and distributor, and talk to them as if they are partners here in Australia, rather than think, somebody overseas, I only have to talk to them when I make a sale or when there's an order. So it's really important to maintain regular communication and participate in the process as well and understand what they're doing, so you're not in the dark.
Thank you. I have one question that I'm going to throw to you, Didi, on the role of the diaspora and the Indian business community in helping us drive. But before I hand the floor to you, we're coming towards the end of our live stream, and I just want to give the panel a heads up that my last question to all of you is going to be, if there was one insight, one sort of top tip you would give to the business audience who are joining us today, but how to navigate the opportunity with India, what would it be? So I'm giving you an advance while we hear from Didi about how you think the diaspora can play a really important role in this business opportunity.
I think, first of all, the diaspora can enhance the credibility both ways. So people like Cristina and people like the Rubicon story are, I mean, if there are 100 people who listen to these stories, they will be certainly impacted and affected more than by hundreds of articles which you read. And I mean, media is, of course, not very kind to the opportunities. It's very unkind to the opportunities because it doesn't address it at all. On the other hand, I think in India, I mean, it's still a lot of family businesses play a very strong role. And therefore, I think the diaspora can play a strong role because of the connectivity. And there are a lot in the diaspora who played on both sides of the spectrum. They've worked in India, they've worked in Australia, and they can bridge and accelerate the gap. I'll give you two examples. Take the case of United States and take the case of UK. I think both countries, the diaspora has been utilized far more effectively by the government, and the diaspora has been far more effectively utilized by the business community. As a matter of fact, they have been great catalysts. They have been tremendous at accelerating the relationship and in helping the conversion process. So it's not just the quantity or the number of people who are here from India, but I think that's one aspect. The second thing is, I think more stories have to be written on both sides on the success of what is happening. I mean, I'm certain very few people on the Indian side would necessarily know of the success that you've had, and very few people here would know. And I think that's an important thing, that I think if we can make a concerted effort as an action point to tell the stories, and many more powerful stories, then it'll certainly help in enhancing. And as you said, things are not going to change overnight, but it's a process.
It is a process, so thank you very much, Didi, on that. So I'm just going to do a rapid fire, starting with you, Bruce. What would you like to say to this business audience in terms of unlocking the opportunity with India?
Do your homework. It's not going to be easy. You need to understand in your space what the drivers for your business are in the Indian environment, who the decision makers are. Is it even viable to be there? You've got to do your homework and then go into as much detail as you can.
Great. Cristina?
I think due diligence and finding the right partner, taking it slowly, don't go too fast, and think of it long term, and get help from Austrade, get help from the Export Council of Australia. I've never attempted to do anything totally on my own. I've always participated at their trade shows, and I've been part of the EMDG, which allowed me to be able to fund the business in India. So get help and get the right partner.
Excellent. And a good segue for where I'm going to finish. And Didi, a word of wisdom, or several.
Well, I mean, I feel that strategic partnership and alliances are very critical because the learning curve is steep, it's difficult, and it's complex. And therefore, we tend to make it sound as if it's too hard. It's too hard because of the complexity, diversity, and India is not easy. But it's full of challenges, but full of opportunities.
Excellent. So with that, could I say that's a very important note on which to finish, because the Australia-India Business Exchange Program, which has been launched by Austrade for 2021 today, is a fantastic opportunity to get this level of support, actually, for all of you who are interested in the Indian business market. There is more information on the AIBX on the Austrade website at austrade.gov.au, AIBX. And there will be a series of upcoming webinars that are going to deep dive, actually, on the 3 sectors that we've discussed today. On the 27th of April, there will be a webinar on critical minerals and METS sector opportunities, followed by agri-foods on the 27th of May and infrastructure on the 10th of June. Those dates are all available on the website, and we would strongly encourage people to take the opportunity, as Cristina just has, for accessing the level of information, insight and support available through the Australian government and Austrade in particular. Asialink is very excited to be partnering through Asialink Business with the business community in Austrade in hosting those opportunities. Could I ask you to join me in thanking these fantastic panellists today, Bruce, Cristina and Dhruv. And I also wanted to say a very significant thanks to the Minister for Trade, Dan Tehan, for joining us today, for his remarks, and for being willing to sit down and do an in-conversation with us to understand a little bit more about the ways in which the government is thinking about the Australia-India relationship moving forward. So on behalf of Austrade and Asialink, that now concludes our program for today. Thank you all very, very much for joining us, and thank you again to our special panellists.